prices a promissory obligation, which means that a promissory note is the only prospective vehicle of a true economy and a true monetary solution, or mathematically perfected economy. So, mathematically perfected economy, as I said, is the monetary equivalent of barter. We're simply promising to pay for something as we consume of it. And this is the only means of monetizing our production in such a way that we suffer no injustice whatsoever. In any case, then, in regard to these preposterous facades which are paraded before us by the so-called financiers, these obfuscators of the money changers, who merely publish evidence of our debts to each other. The preposterous thing about the lie is here he's optimistic about recovery, he says, without any evidence to be so, and despite the fact that the process he imposes upon us can only destroy us by multiplying artificial indebtedness in proportion to remaining capacity to pay, which is why the only means of even maintaining the circulation now is buying federal bonds. You see, creating further federal debt, basically pouring money into circulation, at least equivalent to what we're paying out of circulation, and servicing the present sum of artificial indebtedness, which they've multiplied beyond a terminal state. So the system can't save itself. It's impossible to do it. Now, why is the federal government possibly shutting down? Well, as this federal debt accumulates, more and more of the federal budget, of course, is going to be dedicated to servicing interest. So why is the federal government going to shut down? It's also because of the banking system, and it's also because of this lie of banking, which is a lie of an obfuscation based on imposing an obfuscation of our promissory obligations upon us, so that the bankers could merely publish evidence of our debts to each other and multiply that into a debt to itself, which is eventually terminal to us and dispossesses us of everything. Now, this process further explains all these other things that we're complaining about banking, investing, selling bad debts. Well, if you owned bad debts in the end of such a system, of course, a clever thing to do would be to get rid of them somehow, package them up as if they were some kind of promising asset. And of course, anytime you want to sell anything, you wash your car, same thing happened here. And of course, you have to stretch the realities of the situation, because a peripheral bank is subject to the obfuscation of the currency by which the central bank thrives and imposes terminal failure upon all of us. So of course, these things are bound to happen. So what our problem is, and what we have to understand, is that we can't eradicate all these things but by perfecting economy. To the further discredit of this preposterous facade of recovery, then, is a further Bloomberg Businessweek article, February 24, 2011, a U.S. recovery built on low-paying jobs. Well, of course, when the obfuscation of the currency perpetually multiplies artificial indebtedness in proportion to the circulation, as it leaves ever less of the circulation to sustain industry and markets, and therefore salaries, no hope of recovery could possibly exist but by lower and lower paying jobs in relation to production. So this is likewise an expectable consequence of the obfuscation of the currency. The only way that you can reap just reward for production is to eradicate all exploitation from the system. The banking system, the lie of banking, is a process which perpetually multiplies exploitation in proportion to what it leaves for us to reap for reward. So, by taking ever more from the pool of wealth without contributing to actual prosperity, in fact denying us of prosperity, by the the very fact that they take more from the pool of wealth, they leave ever less for us to prosper. And so, especially as the lifespan of this system reaches its terminus and actually goes beyond us in the already terminal stages of failure, which can only be sustained by further federal borrowing beyond our means, long beyond our means, to continue servicing federal debt. This is why, of course, any hope of recovery, which is a lie, can be built only upon lower and lower paying jobs. In the end, nothing is left to pay for jobs, which means there's no benefit of employment. And so, in the ultimate state of this thing, there's nothing left for us at all, and the bankers have everything for producing nothing and merely usurping our right to issue our own promissory obligations so that they could merely publish evidence of our debts to each other, and convert that first into laundering all the principal into their unjustifiable possession and multiplying the sum of artificial indebtedness into the very terminal failure which eventually and inevitably dispossesses us of virtually everything. The failure of government, therefore, is not an anomaly at all. It's an inevitable consequence of the obfuscation of the currency itself. Nor is it limited merely to federal government, where most of the money is poured into circulation. Because of the escalation of artificial indebtedness on the private sector, neither is the private sector able to afford state government costs. So likewise, we see in another Bloomberg Business Week article, Saturday, March 19th, U.S. governors say federal shutdown budget cuts may hit states. So this affects all public works and government abilities to maintain and sustain infrastructures, which of course is why our highways, for instance, have been in such disrepair for so long, even as recently during the Obama administration we've attempted to pour money into circulation by paying for road repairs, which we couldn't afford otherwise, that is, other than assuming further debt beyond our means, which we can't afford to service because we already are suffering sums of debt which are so vastly beyond our ability to service the sum of debt already, which is why the economy, so-called economy, the live economy, is in a terminal state across the world. In any case, the article continues, a congressional budget fight that shuts the federal government and slashes spending would hobble states struggling to recover from recession, U.S. governors said yesterday. Well, that's not exactly true. A congressional budget fight that shuts the federal government and slashes spending would hobble states struggling to recover from recession. The truth of the matter is, even if this didn't occur, and it can only occur under this obfuscation of the currency because it takes more of the circulation and dedicates it to servicing this escalating sum of artificial debt, leaving ever less of the circulation to sustain all other things. So even if this didn't occur, this slashing of federal spending didn't occur, the states would be hit harder and harder and harder because ever less is left even to sustain further tax revenues which were affordable before but are not affordable afterward. So the article goes on yet to say states don't expect Congress to provide additional aid to close budget shortfalls, as it has during the past 2 years, only because the terminal failure, which is imposed by this obfuscation of the currency, which we continue to tolerate, despite the fact it has no justification whatsoever. Not in law, not in any essays which have ever been written, which prove that a mere publisher of the evidence of our promissory obligations to each other should launder the principal into their possession and then be empowered to charge interest on the tiny costs of publishing the evidence, as if their risk was the entire principal, and multiply a sum of artificial indebtedness into complete dispossession under inevitable terminal failure. No argument can justify this process. None ever have, none ever will. So they can't say that states don't expect Congress to provide additional aid to close budget shortfalls as it has during the past 2 years. I mean, this is entirely to avoid the meat of the matter here. They go on parading this issue in front of the people as if it's unresolvable. Well, sure, here the federal budget deficit is so great that we can't service it. Well, you're not servicing it. It's really not even consequential to you. Except that ever more of federal costs are dedicated to servicing the escalating sum of federal debt, thus making the federal government less and less able of sustaining itself. You see, this all relates to the obfuscation of the currency. It's not even mentioned here, and everyone can write Bloomberg, who listens to this program, can write Bloomberg and ask them to give due time to this proposition of mathematically perfected economy, which resolves all these issues. And guess how many articles they will write. So, in any case, this article concludes saying that these, ramifications are definitely going to impact every state. So, in other words, we can't rely on government to get its house in order, because government has been financed into power by the very enemies of the people who impose this obfuscation of the currency, who monetarily are far, far, far more empowered than we ever can be, especially in the terminal stages of the lifespan of the system. So what they're discussing here are consequences which are only, quote, unresolvable, unquote, if we never give scope to the fact of the crime that this obfuscation of the currency is to all of us. As further evidence of this, invalidation of this facade that, we're about to enjoy some recovery, which they're immediately going to nullify by raising interest rates, of course, a recovery which can't even exist, but they're going to say exists despite the fact that their obfuscation of the currency can only multiply artificial indebtedness in proportion to capacity to survive a perpetual multiplication of artificial indebtedness. Here, a further Bloomberg article, February 17, 2011, is titled, Fed tells banks to stress test capital for recession with 11% unemployment. Here while they're smiling in front of the cameras and lying that, a reduction in unemployment, which doesn't even exist, but they claim exists simply because so many more people fell off unemployment rolls for being unemployed for so long, then new people came onto the unemployment rolls. Here they are behind the scenes telling banks to stress test capital for a recession with 11% unemployment. And you're telling me this Ben Bernanke and Timothy Geithner and all these preposterous deceivers